Welcome to the weather forecast on CIA-TV channel. Dear friends, today we are going to break down what you need to know about the weather that will affect the United States over the next 7 days. Of note, a major storm system is heading into the United States over the next few days, bringing with it the risk of severe weather like strong winds, large hail, and possible tornadoes. Additionally, a more severe heat wave is expected this weekend across much of the United States. Now, folks, we actually have a number of storms that have been developing over the last 24 hours across parts of the Central Plains and Northern Plains. This is just the beginning of a multi-day severe weather event that we will see across areas like the Midwest and Northern Plains. And on top of that, we have had high pressure dominating the Southeast over the last few days, bringing that record-breaking heat wave. But this high-pressure system will weaken today. We're really going to have the threat of some significant severe weather, including strong winds and large hail across the East Coast, as well as back into the Southeast, where strong winds and hail will again be a major concern with a line of storms that will break out later today. Now let's talk more about the potential for severe weather over the next few days. Starting today, we have two small risks of severe weather going on, one of which will move back into Iowa, southern Minnesota, and Nebraska, and then another one that will move back into the Southeast, and a marginal major threat that connects those two places through Montana all the way into Florida, where all the severe weather dangers will be discussed today. But the main concern for both areas will be strong winds. Large hail is also possible, but that's not the biggest concern, at least for those in the Midwest or the Northern Plains. However, if you head back to the Southeast, we could see some storms, especially the early ones that produce ping-pong ball-sized hail. Then, the risk of tornadoes is low today. We have a low 2% risk of tornadoes across Iowa, Nebraska, and southern Minnesota. And then on Thursday, our severe weather threat continues. We have a threat in the Midwest, which is the more concerning threat so far. Then there's another high-margin threat across the Southeast and along the Mid-Atlantic. There's also a minor threat in Montana. Overall, damaging winds and large hail will be the main concerns across all three regions. However, we wouldn't be surprised if we had a low risk of tornadoes again in parts of Wisconsin, southeastern Minnesota, and also Iowa. This will depend again on the storm regime, but there will be just enough wind shear to potentially have an isolated tornado or two. And then on Friday, our severe weather threat will be primarily focused on the Central Plains and the North, and this is the beginning of a multi-day severe weather wave that will be in the Central Plains and the North and the Midwest, as we're expecting more severe weather on Saturday and Sunday. This will come from a shortwave trough that will move across Montana, and really the biggest concern on Friday will be very large hail as well as significant damaging winds. Also on Saturday and Sunday, I expect severe weather to continue across this region. Now let's take a look at the severe weather day by day. Starting today, we're not expecting any real storms to break out this afternoon. Mostly back into central Nebraska, where large hail and damaging winds will be the primary concern initially, but will quickly move into the threat of damaging winds and tornadoes, which will start to coalesce into a small band of storms moving across northeastern Nebraska. We could also see a few small storms in northern Iowa, where there's a chance of a tornado or two. By about 8 to 9 p.m. tonight, we'll still have storms out there, but by then, most of the concerns are just strong winds, some lightning, and some localized flooding. And as we head into early Thursday morning, things will start to dry out a little bit. And then by Thursday afternoon, we're expecting more storms, but that's going to be in parts of the Midwest. So back in the Midwest today, we expect these storms to move through again later this afternoon. A couple of small storms on the low end of the spectrum could develop back into northern Iowa with a low risk of tornadoes, as well as a threat of damaging winds. And then around 8 and 9 o'clock tonight, we'll have some storms in central and southern Wisconsin. If there's any severe weather left over tonight in southern Wisconsin, it's likely just damaging winds. And then tonight, there's really not much rain. And then tomorrow around lunchtime and just after lunchtime is when the storms will break out again, a little bit earlier than we're expecting today in terms of the onset time for these storms. That's going to be closer to 12 or an hour in southeast Minnesota, back into western Iowa. They'll start out as these popcorn storms at first, and then they'll eventually turn into more storms as we go into the late afternoon. And so damaging winds and hail should be the main concerns. But any of these storms that form initially and are a little more contained have at least some low-level tornado potential in the early to mid-afternoon hours. But by the time these things come together around 6 to 7 o'clock, there really isn't much tornado risk left. This line will eventually move into Wisconsin and northern Illinois, with isolated damaging winds being the main concern in the late evening hours. Many of these storms will produce damaging winds, and with today's setup, there's a chance for damaging winds. But the environment today is favorable for damaging winds. So we want to point out that if you go back into the Carolinas or even back into the southeast today, we're going to have a lot of storms there. There's really not much tornado risk here. Back in the Ohio Valley, there's going to be some damaging wind potential as well, but it's going to be a little bit lower than what we're going to see in the southeast. By 7, 8 o'clock tonight, those storms will continue across the Carolinas and Georgia, and then by about 9 to 10 o'clock tonight, most of the Ohio Valley activity will die down, and then a few storms will continue back into Georgia as well as Alabama. In the early evening, we could see a little more organized cluster of storms develop that could produce damaging winds as far south as the Florida Keys, so that includes areas near Tallahassee. Then as we get into Thursday morning, those storms will weaken, and then more storms will break out Thursday afternoon in the same exact area, but those storms won't be as severe as what they're going to be today. And then back in the mid-Atlantic on Thursday, a sudden flurry of storms is forecasted again. Basically, they're going to be moving in different directions. Strong winds with damaging hail are the biggest concern. Lightning is also a possibility. So remember, if you're doing any outdoor activity over the next few days, make sure you're taking these storms seriously. Then as we head into Friday, our severe weather threat is likely to get much higher in the northern plains, where significant severe weather is likely to return, because as we head into mid to late afternoon, we're expecting multiple storms to hit across North Dakota and South Dakota with strong winds, very large hail, and maybe even a few tornadoes. There's going to be a lot of wind shear here in the northern plains on Friday, with a chance for a few strong tornadoes. So we're going to be watching very closely on Friday. There's a severe weather outbreak going on Friday, maybe even a localized tornado outbreak. Then eventually, late in the evening, we could see these storms clustered together, producing damaging winds all the way up to Minnesota. I don't think this is a repeat in the way that we had the derecho a couple of days ago, but I think there are some similar characteristics here. Maybe a little further west for that tornado threat, and then we think the damaging wind threat, if we had a cluster of storms, wouldn't be as widespread, but either way, this is definitely a day that we need to watch very closely. Next up, let's talk about another heat wave is coming this weekend for folks in the Midwest and across the Great Lakes. With above average temperatures, it's very possible in that area, early to mid next week, temperatures will start to level out a little bit across the Great Plains and back up through the East Coast. However, we could see another heat wave back into the northern plains in mid to late next week, just in time for the 4th of July. So that's going to be something to watch. Today, temperatures are currently forecasted to be in the upper 90s and low hundreds across the East Coast, even with the possibility of thunderstorms this afternoon. That's not the point. It's still going to be very hot in the northern plains, upper Midwest. There are some dips in the upper 60s and lower 70s for high temperatures in many areas, which is nice for this time of year. And then on Saturday, obviously a couple of days from now, we expect temperatures to rise again back into the Midwest, where most areas will hit the low 90s again, and even some areas like Texas will spike into the upper 90s. Then, if you go back into the Northeast, areas like Maine will be in the low 50s and 60s after the 100 degrees that we've been dealing with for the last couple of days. That's a serious drop in temperature as we head into this weekend. So make sure you subscribe to the channel, click the bell icon so you'll be notified of the latest updates. We will continuously update the storm situation in the next news. Please subscribe to the channel to follow. Thank you for watching the news on CIA TV channel.